from AOPA, and I'll be your webinar host tonight along with Ian Twombly. But before we get started, I want to welcome you guys to Award-Winning Customer Service, How to Excel in AOPA's Flight Training Excellence Poll. And before we do get into the content, what I'd like to do is just go over the controls for your webinar experience this evening. You'll notice in the lower kind of left-hand corner, you'll see the box, and it's got a triangular play button. So make sure you hit the play button to keep, if the sound stops at any time, hit that play button to see if you can get it restarted. If you need to stop or pause the presentation, you can hit the square button that is next to that triangle. And then if there's any disruption in your signal, any kind of weird thing happening, try hitting the refresh button, which is the button next to the stop button with the two little circular arrows. Over to the right, you'll see the slider bar for controlling your volume. And down below, you'll see a box for Ask a Question. So please do feel free to type in questions, and just be aware that even though we may not respond right away, we will save some of the questions for the end Q&A session. And we do have two folks behind the scenes here, Megan McCutcheon and Les Smith are with me here running the show, and they'll be answering your questions as able. If you do ask that question, one thing you do want to make sure you do is on the box below where it says Ask a Question, make sure you click the arrow so that the answered questions opens up for you, and that way you'll be able to see our responses if we type those back. And again, remember, we will be taking some of those and saving them for the end. Well, now that that business is out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with our presentation tonight. First, I'd like to just introduce myself briefly. I'm Chris Moser again. I'm the manager for flight training initiatives here at AOPA. I am a CFI with single, multi, and instrument ratings, and I was a former freight pilot in Arizona. And I've got over 17 years that I taught in the classroom. I was actually a social studies teacher. And with me tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce Ian Twombly, who is our AOPA editor of both Pilot and Flight Training magazine. Ian's a CFI with single and instrument ratings. He's both an airplane and a helicopter pilot. And he's been involved with the flight training poll since its beginning and has reported on all of the winning schools and visited quite a number of them. So I'm very pleased to have Ian here with you. So thanks for being with us tonight, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Glad to be here and glad to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Yep. All right, so what I wanted to start off with was just a little intro to our idea of the flight training poll. And to give you an idea of where we're going tonight, we're going to talk briefly about why we do the poll and some of the research that went into it. And one of the things I'd like you to notice is that in your lower left-hand corner, there's a box that says Resources, and there's 3 things that you can download there. I believe the first one is the Flight Training Experience, which is the full report. When I talk about the research, you guys can check that out later. Probably a little too long to do now while we're doing the webinar, but it's for your reference. The one below that is a handout. And the handout is one you can take a look at while we talk about the research. It's really short, and you can refer to it, and it's got some more detail than what I will have on the screen. And then finally below that, all the slides that I'll be using tonight are in the third one. I think it says Flight Training Poll, tips and we have the webinar notes, so that's all on there for your reference as well. So feel free to download those, and the handout's the one that might be most useful when we get to the research part of this. And just so you know where we're going, we're going to talk briefly about the research, and then we're going to talk about some of the results from last year, and most importantly, which I'm hoping you guys are all here for, is we're going to talk about some of the things that we see in the schools that do well to give you some tips so that you can do well in the poll too. And we want to see everybody participating. So we'd love to get more and more schools participating, more and more instructors. So to start it all off, I just wanted to share a story from me that when I was in my flight training, and I know Ian's got one as well, back when I did my private, I did it here near Baltimore. And I was at a small 141 school, and in fact the school was so small that they only had 2 172s. And when I finished my training, I went back and I said, hey, I want to go do a cross country. I'd like to rent an airplane. They said, we don't rent airplanes. We're using them for training. And so they said, well, you know what, go across the hallway. There's another school over there, and they rent airplanes, so go check them out. And so I walk across the hall, and I go in the door, and it's like one of those Western movies. I go through the door, and I open it up, and it was like I walked into a saloon, and you just hear the doors kind of clacking behind it, click, click, click. Everybody stopped what they were doing, and they just stared at me. And it was kind of intimidating for that moment, because I was like, and they're like, can we help you? And I was like, yeah, I'm a private pilot, and I'd like to get checked out to rent an airplane. And so in that bit, I don't know if you guys have had experiences like that too, but that was really intimidating. And from when I've shared that with other people, a lot of people said the same things happened with them. Now, it did turn out that the two folks that were running it were super nice and really friendly, and it was a very family atmosphere. But it was just that first impression that we want to make sure that, we want to work towards not making that so that we don't scare people away. I don't know, Ian, you've got a similar story along those lines as well?
Yeah, Chris, well, I think yours is a great point. I mean, we forget, having done this for so long now, how intimidating it can be to walk in for the first time in such a strange and unique environment. But, I grew up around aviation, and so I was fortunate to understand just a very little bit about it, not around the flight training business. And so people didn't stop and stare at me when I walked in, but I guess I wish they did because, looking back, I knew my instructor, of course, and I knew the person who took my money at the desk. And despite being a 141 school with a maintenance shop connected to it, I literally never met another person throughout my entire training. And I feel it's a really missed opportunity, and I'm kind of sad for it when I look back. But and I think they'll come up later when we talk about what the winning schools have done well. And in that point, it's something that they focus on and make sure it doesn't happen to their customers.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That is totally right on point. It's that same idea of just being welcoming and offering community and making people feel like they want to come back and they're part of that group. So we're absolutely going to hit on that. So as a result of experiences like that, and obviously like it happened to both Ian and me, and I've talked to other pilots as well, and everybody that I mentioned that to said, yeah, they've got some story they'll tell about a flight training experience that they had or some instructor that they had. As a result of that, back in, I want to say it was 2010, AOPA commissioned a report, and this is where that handout will come in handy if you're looking at that. And in fact, what went on is basically, if we look at the research, we obviously we all know there's a declining pilot population. We know that student pilot starts, this is as of last year, we're down 29%. Private pilots are down 23.5%. But we see boating, motorcycles, skiing, all that stuff is all increasing. And then we hear about this completion rate, which is estimated to be somewhere around 70 to 80% of people that start flight training drop out. And we've got the full report that talks about that on the link that you can download, and also on our website if you just Google AOPA Flight Training Experience if you missed the download tonight for some reason. And so as a result of that, we commissioned this report or this research, and we wanted to find out, the goal was to find out what's wrong or what's happening in flight training. Of course, the really hard part about that is that it's hard to go out and find the people that dropped out, really trying to find those. So what they did instead was they went and they looked at the people that did finish and say, tell us what went well, and then we kind of look at it that way to see what were the things that people really liked and what are the people, these are the people that finished, of course, what did they not enjoy so much. So what I wanted to do is just give you a really quick primer, and all these details and more are in the full report. You're welcome to look at those later. But I picked out a couple of prime points here, and one is that the primary reason for flight training, if you see this bar graph here, you can see that 65% of people that do flight training are doing it for recreational reasons. And then the next biggest group are professional pilots down there at 29%. And so the point that I take away from this is we need to remember that these folks they don't have to be there. They're not there because like, oh, I want to go be an airline pilot. The vast majority are there because they want to do something fun. And so we want to make sure that we're providing an environment that is fun and welcoming, because if we don't, they're going to go do boating or something else. So it's just a really important key thing to remember that most of these people are recreational. They're doing it for fun. Along with that research, I picked out the two graphs that kind of showed what people thought was positive, what the big ones were, and then on the next slide we'll get to what they thought was negative. And so if you look here, you can see that the main drivers of positive experiences were having a flight instructor that was a good teacher. And of course, this is near and dear to my heart because I spent most of my life as a teacher, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And you can see that this is what people say, having a good instructor was the most important thing. My flight instructor is organized and professional, and I receive a good value. And that was a big thing that came out of this, was the idea that you'll hear people talk about, oh, it's so expensive and everything, but really, if you can show, look at the value you're getting for their money, because they're likely spending that much money on going to buy a motorcycle or getting a boat. So we just need to make sure we focus on not that idea of, oh, it's this much money. Talk about, you spend this, you spend this, but look what you're getting for it. Look at this amazing experience you can have. On the negative side of things, when they asked what were the negative things that happened, what were the negative aspects, you can see that number one here, we can see costs, which that's not a surprise. And the next one down was poor or unclear instruction or training. So again, for me as a teacher, I'm looking at this going, it's really important to be a good teacher, and I think we probably all know having a good instructor, how important that is for having a good training experience. And then down below, that's weather, and so you can look at those in the report later if you like. But a big key here for me, the point is that instructor experience and making it something positive for our customers. This is where that handout comes in, and what they did was they took all these factors and the research company put them together into what they felt made up an optimal flight training experience, which is what we're going to do as we go through this evening, looking at various data from last year and then the tips for this year on what you can do. And so this is on the handout. I just zoomed in a little bit, and you'll see that the big 4 categories, educational quality, includes things like having good instructors, being organized in lessons, providing resources. Customer focus is the next biggest one, with that idea of value, scheduling your aircraft, having decent quality aircraft. Next one down, community. So the idea of having a community, feeling like you belong to something. I know that was what Ian was getting out with his, with that sort of they didn't really provide that community part, and recognizing our clients. And then finally, information sharing. And you'll notice by the size, that's where the importance came, because on this next slide I'll show you, when they asked the reputation drivers, you can see the educational quality was by far the biggest part of a school's reputation. And the next one down, customer focus. And you can see the community and information sharing being approximately equal. So these are really critical for us to do well if we want to grow our pilot population and be successful flight training providers. All right, so as a result of that, I know that Ian was around when all this happened. We had the Flight Training Poll and Excellence Awards were created to help us measure and find out how many, what can we do, what's going on in the flight training industry, what's sort of happening, and what can we do to promote this research. So last year we had 39 questions for schools, 27 for CFIs, 2 free response questions. And the free response questions were mainly used to help us figure out who in that best category, who the best were. The 39 questions and the 27 for CFIs, we use those as a kind of, objective level, how well did you do? And then we took the schools that rose to the top, and then from those looked at their free response questions to help us determine where they were, if they fit into the outstanding category, and also into the best category. For 2016, just a quick update, we've actually been busy editing the poll and trying to improve it. And we've actually gotten it down to 29 questions for schools, 26 for CFIs. So the people that take it, the respondents, have the choice of rating the school, rating the instructor, or they can do both. And then there's still the 2 open-ended free response questions for each set. So you'd have a positive, kind of like, what does my school or CFI do well? What do they need to do to improve? And they do those, and again, we'll use those to determine who kind of gets in that best category. And then the one new thing that we're doing this year is we're going to publish ahead of time the standards for the honor roll. Because I know a lot of schools out there are really fired up and they did well and they get on the honor roll. So we're going to set that out before we even open the poll. You'll know these are the standards, here's how we're measuring it. And of course we're not going to tell you exactly all the secret sauce, but we're definitely going to tell you these are the standards we're looking for. And if we get, and I hope we do, if we get 200 schools that are good enough to be on the honor roll, then that's okay with me. So that's kind of where we're going with the flight training poll this year. Now, a really key thing, you might be saying, okay, you got all this AOPA, you got all this research, you've got this flight training poll, why should I participate? What's in it for me? And one of the things here is that customers seek out schools that win. And in fact, I know before I get into that further, Ian, you've got a comment?
Yeah, well, just that I think it's important to note that the awards program in general is meant as it's meant as a positive influence. When this began and we started looking at how best to kind of communicate the research and to get schools to, I guess, better understand what was involved, everything was looked at from sort of a rating scale to anything you could imagine, really. But we kept coming back to the awards program because we thought it was important to build up the schools that are doing well, to basically highlight those and put a spotlight on those that are really successful. And so that's why, as part of it, it's not just the awards and the customer feedback. Those things I think are really important. It's also communicating it afterwards, not just to other schools so that they can do, hopefully learn from what those schools are doing well, but also to the pilot population in general to know what to expect at a good flight training experience so that they can demand it at their schools. So it's meant really to be a building piece. That's why we do it, I would say.
Oh, thanks a lot, Ian. In fact, you're totally right on point with that. And I know that when I get down to the bullet, in fact, I'm going to jump to the bottom bullet on this slide where it says new for 2016 report cards. You were totally on point. Last year we experimented with creating report cards, and so what we did is after we got the results in, we had one of our resident statisticians. He helped us out, and he took the data and he crunched it, and then from that we were able to, if schools had 5 or more respondents, we said they were eligible, and we just tried to test it on a small one, and I'll talk about why we didn't send it out widely in a moment. But basically what happened was he was able to create sort of find out an industry average on each of the questions in each of the categories, and then he was able to say, here's where your school fell in that to give you an idea of where you were. And the schools that we were able to get it to were just blown away by the fact that said, this is amazing because it really lets us know what our customers are saying about us. And so this year, what we're working towards, and by the way, the reason we didn't send it out to everybody last year was it was a very manual process. Basically what happened was that we got those reports, but then manually I had to send out the reports to each person individually, and it was very time-consuming looking over all the emails and getting all that. So we've made it our goal this year to, in fact, we're already working on it now. This isn't going to happen until October. We're already working on the process now of how do we take the reports and how can we automate that so that everyone who gets the minimum number of respondents, in this case it's going to be 5 this year is our plan, will get a report card. So I'm going to go ahead and I got the question mark there, so as long as we don't run into a big issue of getting this out, that is our plan, and we want to make it happen because we know how valuable it is for schools to get that. So if you want feedback from your customers, want to know how you're doing and how to improve, this is how we're going to do that for you. We want to help you out. We want you to be able to look at this and go, I know what's going on here, I can see how I'm doing, and I know what I can do to sort of turn things in the right direction. Or just really, more importantly, I'm hoping you're already really doing things. I imagine since you're on this webinar tonight, you're probably doing things well already, but our goal is always, how can I do it even better? I got some comments here. I was able to speak to 2 of our past winners for Best Flight School and some of our best schools that are out there, and they were able to tell me, why should I participate? And the first one is Paragon, who was our best flight school in 2014 and also got President's Choice last year in 2015. And they basically, as Chris Shanesy was able to tell me, one of the co-owners of Paragon, said that literally the day after it was announced that they were the best flight school in 2015 or whatever, literally the next day, a client called and said, I saw you guys in AOPA, I saw that you won, I want to come to you and I want to do my private pilot certificate with you. And he said right off the bat, it put Paragon on the map for potential clients. He said the award recognition it's basically quoting from him, instant credibility in a bottle. He said their client response was immediate and it was a big boost to their business. And I'm assuming most of you guys would like more business and would like to do better or get more business. We'd like to have enough that we have, we can't handle it all. The AOPA awards are about doing the right thing and taking care of our clients. And he says at Paragon that the award is the absolute best way they can receive it because it's a direct reflection of what their clients' experiences are and of the perceptions of Paragon. And so he even says that we wear it proudly and sing it loudly. And you're going to see, I was able to talk to Bob Hepp at Aviation Adventures as well, and he kind of mirrors a lot of those same things. He said the Flight Training Excellence Awards were exactly what they were looking for. He said, I felt like, I really felt like we were doing something special, especially here in the D.C. area, and the awards were the way to do that. It differentiated us in the best way possible by what our customers are saying about us. He said it's become a major part of our identity. It put us in the spotlight. It allowed him to open up partnerships with AOPA, Gamma, NBAA, and his instructors even now, because of it, have been recognized at Oshkosh, and so they'll wear their red shirts and red shoes. You may have seen that stuff proudly. And he says when people walk in the front door, it's having that recognition, it just lets people know when they walk in, this is the right place to do flight training. So right from the mouths of 2 of our past winners, Paragon and Aviation Adventures, right off the bat saying this really helped them out, it was really valuable, and so right there should be enough for you to say, I want to participate in this and see how well we can do. Secondly, on the second bullet there too, clients asked, if you ask your clients, if you ask your customers, rate my school, think about what that's telling them too. It's a clear message to them that you want to improve what you're doing, and it shows clients that you value them. And when you do that, you're actually getting them, by them taking the poll, it's getting them to invest in you, and so now they're going to want to see you succeed because I took the time to fill out the poll. I want to see you guys win, and so it's that kind of nice trade-off there, or nice sort of relationship you're building of, you know, them rating you, you valuing them, and then them wanting to support you and make you successful as well. So with that said, I'm hoping that you guys are interested, and if you haven't already participated, that you're a little bit interested now. Let's just take a look at what some of the results from last year said. Now, as an overall, for industry feedback, I'm going to talk mostly about the schools here. It was overall very positive. You got to figure that people that are going to take the time to fill down and take these 20-some questions, 30-some questions, that generally speaking, they're either going to really like their school, or maybe in some cases they really don't like their school. But I have to say that overall, it was massively positive, very, very positive. But there were a couple of things that popped out at us when we went through. So I want to say all the other questions that I'm not covering, the reason I didn't cover them is because they are so positive. Even some of the ones that I will cover were very positive as well. So the first one here is just an overall. If you look on this graph, this is on the educational quality section of the questions. You'll see that the red bars all the way to the right, 12, it's basically there. That is the number of people that gave their school 12 out of 12 on all the questions. There were 12 total questions in this category, and they gave them top marks, the best marks on those 12 questions. And you can see how it's heavily weighted towards that positive side. So on the negative side, where people gave no good responses, there was only one person out of those that gave no good responses for their school. So overall, very positive. Let's take a look at some specifics. One of the questions was, I had an opportunity, even if I didn't take it, to meet my examiner. And so again, this is overall positive stuff, but this one says that we had 65% of the respondents said, yes, I did get that opportunity, and 35% said no, they didn't. So, of course, one of the things that we have in the research is we want to try to make it so the check ride's not scary. It's this big scary thing. Here's the FAA, and we want to make it so it's friendly and make them a little less nervous. So one good thing to do is maybe let them meet the examiner. Take a look at another one in the education. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say, that's something that Bob does at Aviation Adventures in partnership with, actually, it's FISDO. Some examiners got together, and he hosted these Meet the DPE night seminars, and they're hugely popular. And I went to one, and it's fascinating because it's like, I think when you're in training, you think of the test as like any test you would have taken in school, which is, something to be sort of afraid of. You don't really know what's going to be on it, and the examiners are great, though. They answer any question. They basically tell you exactly what they're going to do. Obviously, the PTS does that, but I don't think many people realize it. And it was an amazing experience. And I could see people, it's like the ice is broken. And after that, not only could they choose which examiner maybe whose personality they liked, but they also got a lot of insight into what was going to happen on the test. So I think that one is, we often forget that, but it can have a major impact.
Well said too, Ian, because I know that just as you were saying that too, I was thinking that the school where I taught in Arizona, which was a pretty big flight school, was the same thing. We had probably 3 or 4 regular examiners that were around at least a couple of times a week because we had check rides going on pretty regularly. And I can remember that exact thing, having that ability to meet them and saying, hey, come here, meet Michelle or meet Glenn or whomever it was. It allowed them to pick who they were comfortable with, and now they weren't so scary with somebody. And oh, it's just that guy that answered my question about, got me my student pilot certificate or answered the questions I had about a reg or whatever. So yeah, good point.
Yeah.
The next one we got is my flight school uses a training syllabus. And you can see that overall this is pretty strong. 85% said yes. But what kind of blew me away is that these are, again, typically very positive responses, and 16% of those schools still said no. So to me, that's still too high. And of course, I might be biased as a teacher that I'm really big on having sort of an organized approach, and we saw earlier for that positive driver that an organized approach is really important. So I really do think that having a syllabus of some sort, it doesn't have to be like a 141 syllabus, but a basic plan that goes through and lets your students know where they are and where they're going so they can see just their progress and know what's coming next so they can prepare. It makes it more organized.
Yeah, and that one also gets to, I think, the value question. I remember, I started on the hotline at AOPA in the CIC, and I remember people used to call in all the time, students, and they would assume they're getting ripped off by their instructor. And I think part of that is that they didn't use the syllabus, and so they had no idea where they were in the course. They didn't know how much longer it was going to take. They didn't know if they were just repeating the same lesson. And so a syllabus really just keeps everybody on the same page. And it seems so obvious, but we really just have to be more disciplined about it.
Yeah, you definitely can't discount it. And I guess the other thing too is that, especially if you're like a 61 school, you don't have to feel like you're completely tied to it. You know, like a 141, I know it's a little bit more strict in the way that it is, but having that structure and making sure you're doing, you know, basic landings before you do saw fields and that sort of stuff makes it so it works. And a quick example, I know during my instrument rating, I remember having my instructor at the time having me do a DME arc with an approach, and I hadn't even learned what an approach plate was yet, and I had no idea what was going on. So there's an example of if he wasn't really using the syllabus, and it made it really, like, that was a wasted lesson for me because I had no idea what was happening.
I still don't know what's happening with DME arcs. I don't know if that's...
Our next one on educational quality, and the last one I chose for this category, was I've been asked by my flight school for formal feedback on my customer satisfaction. And this one, I have to say, you know, that, and we'll see later too, that the schools that are really kicking butt are the ones that do this. We had 51% of people said they were not asked, at least not asked formally, about their customer satisfaction and how they thought things were going. And so I just think this is such a huge one. I remember I went up and we had a former two-time honor roll winner of Ventura flight training up in Farmingdale, New York. And one of the coolest questions when I went to visit them that they told me was, they said that when they were having trouble and they turned things around, he said one of the things they started doing to turn things around was they said to their customers, what can I do better? Not what can I, like, did I do anything wrong or was everything okay? I can always do something better. So every time they would finish a lesson is, what can I do better for you as an instructor? What can we do better for you as a school? And he said at first when things weren't going well for them, they wouldn't ask that. And he said mainly it was because I was afraid of the answer I would get because I knew things were wrong. But once they started asking it, now they can start driving towards what can we do to fix it and make your experience better. All right, our next section is customer focus for flight schools. And so again, you can see in this one there were 8 questions, and you can see that the vast majority of people were on the very positive side, giving either 6, 7, or 8 out of 8 top marks on these questions. And so let's take a look at some of the details here. So the first one is, and overall the ones I picked out of here aren't quite as maybe controversial, if we can even call it that. But it was, I just picked out some. There was this one that said I had access to a flight simulator, and you can see that 74% of people said yes, and 26% said no. And so I picked this one out just because it was one of the larger ones. But the real question is the follow-up one, because you know some schools may not have a flight simulator, and that's okay. But of course they are valuable. And if you look right here, that of those who said, no, I did not have a flight simulator, the follow-up question was, if you did have access, do you think it would have improved your flight training experience? And you can see it's kind of almost evenly split here, yes 47 and no 53. So, you know, like I said, no major controversy here, but just kind of interesting that people are interested in flight sims, and they are really useful, especially for rainy days. You can go in and do procedures training in them, or kind of the chair flying sort of thing, and you can also use them for practicing navigation where you can pause it. So I know for me, when I'm instructing, I love having it because I can pause the thing and talk about it, whereas in the airplane, we still are flying, we got to look for traffic, and it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and obviously we talk a lot about Redbird because it's still pretty new and exciting, but I mean, it doesn't require a huge investment. I mean, we're talking PCATs with desk-mounted yokes. They can be just as effective for certain things, and again, I think it speaks to the value question.
Exactly, and I'd even argue that in the case of if the budget's an issue, even just getting a decent flight sim like an X-plane or something on a computer and getting the yoke or a joystick too, maybe you don't charge for it, maybe you just offer it for lessons, and you can still charge for ground training. But it's a useful tool for being able to pause it and talk about what's going on. And obviously, as you can upgrade, that's even better because they get more realistic. All right, and the last one in the category on customer value was I had trouble getting the time I wanted with my instructor or my airplane, and it's a little hard to see, so I'll point these out. But on the never side, I never had trouble. Is the darker purple one? So 22% said, hey, anytime I wanted it, I had it, and then rarely, which is really good, is the 44%. So I mean, obviously things happen. Somebody might get sick. The airplane has a maintenance issue. But we still have a decent chunk there that said sometimes, and then the often and always are the smaller, the green and the blue. But obviously people want to make sure that we have the process in place to make sure we're providing the airplanes and instructors on the customer's time. And that's really the key thing is make sure you're thinking about your customer, not, oh, I'm an instructor and I don't like instructing on Saturday, or I only instruct until 5 p.m. A lot of times for our customers it may be that they can only come after work, which might be after 5 p.m. So trying to make those accommodations for them as we're able. All right, we're getting to the third of the categories, aviation community. And again, really important here. We can see that overall, very positive scores. And the aviation community one is more about the idea of making that fun kind of family atmosphere. And so if we look here, there we go. Aviation milestones are recognized. And so this is the kind of thing where maybe you do the thing where you cut off the shirt tail for somebody that's soloed, or I know the Paragon likes to put it up on the wall, or take their picture and put it on the wall. Just do something to recognize it. I can remember when I soloed, I remember I used to be one of those people that would come after I was teaching, and I'd come after school, and so it might be 5 o'clock at night. And I remember soloing, and my instructor sending me up, and I got back down, and that was it. He was just like, okay, good job. And so I do see these, other places that make a big deal out of it, and we want to try to do that if able, because it's a big deal. And you can see here that 24% of schools aren't celebrating things like soloing or new ratings or getting your certificate. So it's really nice to recognize what's going on. And in fact, it's a great opportunity to even we'll talk about it later with media, but to let the local newspaper say, hey, we had somebody soloed an airplane, or somebody passed a check ride, and see if maybe the local paper will pick it up as well, especially if you're in a smaller market.
Yeah, and this one I think, you can be so creative with it. I mean, obviously there's always the shirt tail, but I know more and more people, it seems like, are doing like the ice bath. At AOPA we just print out kind of a larger print of the picture at solo or when they pass a check ride or whatever, and hang a pen next to it, a Sharpie, and everybody can come by and sign it. And I still have mine actually for my helicopter add-on. I have it hanging up in my garage. I think it's the coolest thing because just like you, I didn't have that as a private. So it can be really the little things.
Absolutely, and in fact, if any of you folks are coming by, if you're at any of our fly-ins this year, or if you're at Oshkosh or Sun and Fun, make sure you stop by where the yellow airplanes are. We've actually got student pilot shirts, so we actually give them to student pilots. If you have any student pilots that are out there, have them stop by and see us, and we will give them that if they haven't soloed yet, and it's got already the dotted lines where you cut it out when it's all done. And that's a lot of fun, too, to have the instructor sign it and kind of do a thing where it's like, so-and-so soloed without, and the instructor's name. It's a lot of fun. You can frame that and say, it's not expensive at all, but it does make it that really kind of memorable experience, which it is. I mean, I think everybody remembers the day they soloed. I can remember my legs shaking before my instructor signed me off. Our last category was information sharing. And so, again, look at this, overwhelmingly positive. This is like by far the one that's kind of skewed to that positive side. So 56 out of the total people taking it here, the percentage, I think it's 56%, gave 4 out of 4 out of these 4 questions on top marks or best marks. And so in this one we just had, I knew how far along I was in the overall training process. And you can see that the blue is always, 61% said they always knew where they were. The green is the usually, and we still had a little bit there that didn't know where they were. And this is, again, I think where Ian was going too, where you were discussing the idea of the syllabus here, of letting people know where they are. And so they kind of know where I'm in the process, and I don't feel like I'm being cheated, that they're just soaking me for money, and I don't know how far along or when it's going to end.
Yeah, so many different facets to that, from educational quality, I think, to value, to just transparency. I mean, the transparency is a huge thing because it's such an unknown world for students. So all goes into that.
Well, Ian, I know that this is the part we've been waiting for. We're going to get into the meat of this now, and this is the part I'm hoping everybody was logging in for as well. We're going to talk about what can I do, or hopefully what can I continue to do that's going to help me do well in the poll. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at our 3 best winners from the past 3 years since we started the Best Flight School Award. And we're going to take a look at the mission statements, some highlights of those, of what they are doing. And a big thing is we want to find out, are there any similarities in what these folks are trying to do? So back in fact, I'll turn a little bit more of this over to Ian because I know you've been involved in this since the beginning. So we got San Carlos here, and so I'll just, we can see here basically their big things are safety, community, adventure. So Ian, did you want to mention anything here about what you saw when you reported on them?
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting about the 3 schools that have won the Best Award so far is that they're all very different schools with very different environments, but they all have very similar traits. And so I know that sounds maybe a little contradictory, but it's like they're not, you wouldn't consider them sort of carbon copies of each other or franchises of each other. And so one thing that really fascinates me about that is that it shows that there are different ways to approach all of these issues. San Carlos, Dan Dyer, the guy who started San Carlos, he started the school because he was instructing in another school, I think, in the area, and was really just sort of fed up with the way it was working, and he thought, well, I can do it better. And so he just really tirelessly studied all the other schools, studied. He had some basic, he had actually, I say not basic, he had a really extensive business background, I believe marketing background. And so he built what he thought would be a perfect environment from the beginning. And so what that is it's I think, fairly unusual. California especially has these really large flying clubs, and people can go and they join them, but they're kind of for-profit clubs. They're kind of a mix between a flight school and what we would think of as a regular club. The benefit there being that you have this built-in social atmosphere. And so Dan kind of did the same thing. St. Carlos, at its core, I would say, is a flight school, but combined with it is this social club. And so students have this built-in network, and they know exactly what's going to happen. They go through the training, they finish, and then they're there. They're in the community ready to go. And you can see that here in their mission statement. Develop safe pilots, proficient pilots, share the kind of beauty and wonder things, safe, well-maintained, really core business stuff. Hopefully everybody's doing these things. But then this last one, encouraging the social nature. So they, interesting business. And they have he called it like a high touch point. So very unlike, Chris, your or my experience where we walked in and nobody talked to us and we didn't meet anybody, there it's the exact opposite. To the extent that, like, when you come back from a lesson, when a student comes back from a lesson, parks the airplane, they bring out somebody in a golf cart who helps you push it back and gives you a bottle of water. So they take that customer service and customer experience thing to the kind of the nth degree with success.
That's amazing. Go ahead, Ian, and I'll let you go ahead because you've reported on all these guys. So Paragon is our next one, 2014.
Yeah, so Paragon, it's I guess actually St. Carlos. Now, come to think of it, all three really are relatively new schools. And Paragon again was just a couple of younger guys who got together and said we can do this better. And I would say if there's one way to describe Paragon, it's that they all the things that you would think of with just sort of core flight school functions, they do really, really well. They sweat the details, I guess is the best way to put it. So, in fact, they'll be the first ones to say that they don't have any secret recipe. They don't have any sort of a secret playbook. They just do the things that they think they should, that every school should do, but they just are really disciplined about it. One way that's manifested is in hiring. So, I think many schools, many places, they want to obviously be able to provide a service, and so they'll hire a CFI. It comes in, maybe they fly with them in advance, maybe they don't. Paragon will actually, if they, let's say, hire a CFI from out of town, they'll fly them in. They'll do lots of sit-down interviews. Then they'll, it's all about the person and the personality. So the interview process is actually quite rigorous. And they spend a lot of time making sure that they only hire instructors who really buy into their mission. So in that way, obviously, they can help control it. Then they do very regular staff meetings, making sure that they're checking in on every student. And again, just that kind of community atmosphere. The wall, their sign wall that you mentioned is really cool. This big thing in the hangar that everybody can see all the time. And so it's a neat place and a cool atmosphere.
Exactly. I know that Jeffrey Wolf said that exact thing you talked about. He says, we don't have any secret sauce. We just execute on it. We just, it's not like we're doing secret. It's the stuff you're supposed to do, and we just make sure we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Our next
That's
one
right.
is Aero Venture Institute, this past year's winner.
Yeah, Aero Venture is, I would say, a bit unique among the other two. They started with this idea that aviation should be, that more people should be exposed to aviation. And so while the school is obviously very successful, I think one thing that kind of sets them apart is their outreach to the community. And you can see that kind of at the end, community partners. They are really passionate about improving kind of the image and the access of general aviation to the larger community. They do a lot of free flight days at the airport. They do a lot of outreach to local high schools and boys and girls clubs. And in fact, George, one of the part owners, he says he spends kind of more time off-site. And yeah, they do get customers who kind of come in that way, but that's not really their main goal. Their main goal is to share kind of the joy of aviation and what that can be for people. So that's where it's unique. I mean, but that's not necessarily obviously the reason they won. I think couple things that set them apart. One is that and I actually saw this when we were there, they had an intro flight student, and they have a very regimented process that they take people through. They tell them to expect to be there for a couple hours. They bring them in, they meet with them, they talk about the whole process, they introduce them to everybody in the school. Then they have a little sim in the back office. They sit on the sim for a few minutes, talk about kind of basic flight controls, and then they go out and fly. And when they're done flying, they come back, and then they talk kind of specifics, and then they put them on the schedule. Again, just a really disciplined approach. And then the other thing there is it's really nice because it's a welcoming place. The day that I went, there are couches everywhere, and they don't have the fanciest building, at least not right now. They're going to. They're renovating one in the airport, actually building it. But they don't have the fanciest building right now, but what they do is take advantage of what they have. And so they've got these couches, and people literally just come in and they hang out. And everybody knows everybody. The students all hang out together. They come out and help at these community events. And so it really is a family atmosphere. I mean, they say that, but it's true. They mean it.
Yeah, and I can remember reading some of this when we were doing the panel stuff. And by the way, the panel thing we do when we do the selections at the end they're stripped of identification. We make sure that we can't tell who the schools are, and then go through and read them. And I can remember them talking about AeroVenture and the idea of just that sort of really friendly family that it's like they really do bring you in, and you don't feel like you're being, you feel like you're part of the family. I think it was Deb that, I think when you said, Ian, maybe when you guys came in, she had like hot chocolate or something for people, or it was a cold day when you guys were up there. Yeah, that sort of thing. It just makes them feel welcome.
Yeah, and it's true. And the students would say that to me. They're like, I come in from a lesson, and she would know it's like, not only would there be coffee like in the pot ready to go, she would have it poured and know what they liked in their coffee, and it would be sitting there ready to go for them. So it's cool. And again, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. That's one thing that George emphasized was they say their whole goal is to make it seem completely relaxed and welcoming on sort of the public-facing, but in the background, very disciplined, very structured, and making sure that, just for example, basic things like when somebody hasn't scheduled for a couple of weeks, they call them. Hey, where you been? We miss you. Come on back. Just sort of what you would hope that everybody tries to do.
I think of a common thing you mentioned here too is that all these schools too. I know from what you mentioned about the social atmosphere out at San Carlos, and I know Paragon does the same thing. I remember there was a comment last year from them too that there was a student that came in, and the person came in and they had their dog with them, and they took care of their dog while they were getting their house set up and that sort of stuff. And so again, it's that whole thing of just, I think what it really is about it's that idea of focusing on the customer. It's about the person, it's about the people, and sort of the flight training is sort of, I don't want to say secondary, but it's the main focus is take care of my client, take care of my customer, and then how do I serve them best? And I think that's kind of a big part of the secret here.
Yeah, and I like to think of, flight training, I mean, really what we're doing is offering them access to the aviation community. I mean, obviously we're trying to train them to be safe, proficient pilots, but really we're trying to bring them into the community. We're their bridge point to the community. So one thing about the research, APTO, the group that did it, they study a lot of this kind of customer experience stuff, not necessarily customer satisfaction. That's a much more basic study. This is really into the customer experience, and they said this is the first thing, and they've done tennis and all kinds of other applications. This is the first time they've ever seen community come up in this. So it is an important point.
Absolutely. Perfect. Let's take a look now at some of the tips that you and I talked about in each of the categories. And so kind of hitting on in the educational quality thing, which we know from the research was the most important thing. And of course, I'm completely unbiased as a teacher that I also emphasize this, but obviously it's really important having a good instructor. And we can see here some of the common themes that we saw were having the great CFIs. And I know you mentioned about how Paragon spends all that time in interviewing, and it's not an uncommon thing to hear them say we got to get the right flight instructor because that's such, they are your school to the customer. So really make sure you hire the right people. And then you mentioned as well, talking about the oversight by the administration, making sure that the school knows what's going on. How is your student doing? And then I know that up at Ventura, I remember talking to them, and they had a process too where not only would the CFI ask, what can we do better, but in addition to that, they would have periodically the chief CFI or the flight school manager would also meet with them and check, because you know it is, sometimes you got your instructor and they become a friend of yours and you don't want to say, oh, you know, this, I don't quite get this, or I kind of don't like this part. You kind of feel bad about that. They're much more open to maybe saying that to the manager, and not in a way to get them in trouble, but just maybe like, I didn't really understand this concept and I'm not quite sure how to explain that, and that way they can address it and either help the CFI figure out how to do it, or to get you up with another instructor just to help figure that part out. And as we know, any good professional CFI is not going to mind having that extra help from, to kind of trade it off and help each other learn. And really what it's about is getting our customers and our clients to succeed. That's what we want to have happen.
Yeah, and I think one thing about this that's important to note is that schools who put a lot of focus on this, hiring the right instructors, will go, and we've heard this, I know, Chris, a couple of times, they will take this to the point where they will have to turn away business because they can't find the instructors they need, rather than just hire the next person off the street to be able to go in there and teach somebody. So it's that important to them.
Exactly, and the fact that, that's the way to be, though. You got to have the right quality people. And then we got the clear training path and beyond, something we talked about. All the schools that have done well are using a syllabus. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a structured, super strict 141 type syllabus where you've got to finish this lesson and you can't go on to the next, but a structured way of doing it where you're not just kind of jumping around in the training process and making it harder on your students. And I know I've heard, I was a instructor and then a check airman and as a teacher and everything else, so people say, oh, I don't need the lesson plan, or it's just a limitation. But you got to remember that this isn't for the instructor. It is to help them structure their training, but it's also for the student to help them see what's coming so they can be ready. And that's the thing we got to make sure we remember, is that when we go out to do this, this isn't about me, the instructor. This is about what can I do to help my student succeed. And that really is the key. So what are the tools I can give them? What do I need to do to help them succeed, even if it's maybe something that I may not particularly like doing it that way. But if it helps them, I think that's the most important thing to have happen. All right, take a look at our next one for the customer focus side. And again, we're looking at kind of the themes that we saw. We've got take care of the customer, ask what you can, and this is I already said this question too, or the one that they ask. Just take that question, not how did I do, because what the answer you probably get, oh, you did fine, or how am I doing? Everything's good. It's even if you thought things are going well, and hopefully they are, it's what can I do better? Challenge them with what can I do better for you? It's like, maybe you feel like I'm in the 90%. What can I do to get to that 91%? I want to be the best I can be. So what can I do to help you do that? And then we've got to make a great first impression. And then, Ian, you talked a lot about the idea. This is the thing where that school that I went to, after I got my private, they fell a little short of that first impression, at least in that initial couple of minutes there, is the idea of having that structured flight experience. When people come in, have a process. Have it where it's like, I know I've been to a couple of schools and seen this, where it's like when people come in, it's not just, oh, you want to go for a ride? Okay. Hey, Joe, you busy? Let's take them up flying. They've got a whole process where it's like, let's take you around for the tour of the school. Here are our airplanes. Look, here's where we do maintenance, and everything is clean and neat, as it can be, but orderly. It gives them the impression that things are going well here. Just check out the sim and look over here, and here's how we do scheduling, and let's meet the instructor, and let's meet the chief CFI, and they take them on this whole official tour because it makes them feel like, wow, you guys really have it together. You're willing to take me behind the scenes and show me. That really shows that, we're not trying to hide anything here, and that we want to make it special for you. And then having that special experience for the flight, and when they get back, make a big deal out of it. How was that first flight? Was it great? I know one school I saw, it was up in New York, it was taking pictures and giving them a packet, here's some stuff. They even had stuff about AOPA in there, or whatever it may be, and just giving them the stuff about, look at all this great thing you can do flying, and and like you said too, Ian, let's get them on the schedule right now. What can we do? Like, did you have a great time? Let's get you on the schedule right now. Let's get you started on this flight training thing. Yeah,
and actually one thing that AeroVenture is doing that they're finding a lot of success with is they call it a Top Gun package, and it sort of bridges the gap between intro flight and I would say like a solo package. And I can't remember exactly how many flights it is, something like 4 or 5 flights, and then a couple hours in the sim. And so it's pretty clever. It's a T-shirt, and you get a call sign, and they get you on the schedule for these like 4 or 5 flights. And it's basically kind of an intro to it's a full intro to aviation, not just an airplane ride. And it's a set price. It's, whatever it is, $600-700. And obviously, and they find that the conversion rate off of that is significantly higher, as you would expect, than it is the intro flight. And they have people who go for it actually, I think with greater frequency than the intro flight. So just another way to, we all kind of think of the intro flight as this $99, let's go fly for a half an hour kind of thing, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. I love the idea you talk about the conversion rate, too, because it really is. I think it's the idea of the T-shirt and the call sign. It's that idea of that community, making them feel like they belong. I mean, that's I know for me, when I was a kid, and for me it was Star Wars, watching the X-Wing fighters, and I wanted to be a pilot, and that was the whole thing where it all began for me. And I know for, becoming a pilot is a lifelong dream, and making them, as soon as they come in, making them feel like this is possible. I am part of this. I'm not this outsider that doesn't know how to speak the language. It's so important in getting people to feel like, yes, I can do this. Because think about how intimidating that can be at first if it's just about, oh, it's going to take you flying. Here's a whole bunch of books, read these, and that sort of thing. To really make it so it seems doable, because thinking back to your own student pilot experience, it can seem kind of intimidating, and it can seem like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be able to do this? The next one down, too, is quality aircraft, and this one I really wanted to mention was that this does not mean new aircraft. I think the common theme here is that it just means that they're not only well-maintained mechanically, but that you keep them nice. Think about, I always like to use the analogy here of a rental car. If you go to a rental car company and you get in and there's a bunch of trash left over in the plane, or there's a water bottle and everything else, and the seats are all ripped up and everything else, you're probably not going to go back there again, unless they were maybe really cheap. But, it's like you're not going to go back there. You're going to want to go to a place that at least keeps them clean and maintained. And so the same for airplanes. I learned how to fly in P model 172s, like 1980 model, I think is what they were, or something like that. And the school did a decent job of making sure to clean them up when you're done with them. And they were okay, and they were solid, and we never had any issues with them. So again, it doesn't mean you have to have brand new aircraft. Just take care of the ones you have and clean them, and if you need to, put a seat cover on or make it look nice, because that just gives them the impression that I've got something nice to fly in, rather than some old plane that's got the seats ripped up and everything.
Yeah, and Chris, I know we know somebody who had a lot of really creative ideas for spares and backups, so that if they did have something go wrong, the downtime was very minimal. I think thinking ahead and planning for contingencies like that is nice, so that when an airplane goes down, like it will, it doesn't shut down the whole operation for 2 days.
Exactly. And really, it's kind of gets to that whole record-keeping thing, or not record-keeping, but sort of tracking and knowing, hey, this one's about to come up for a 100-hour, whatever it may be, and really kind of thinking ahead, like you said, being proactive about it and saying, okay, that one's going to go down. We're going to get that one set so that Saturday I can do the 100-hour on it, or annual whenever it's due, and planning for that so you can minimize your downtime, especially if you've got a rainy day coming up or something. And then, of course, cleaning comfortable facilities and environment. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. We don't want to make sure we don't walk in and there's grease and everything else, all over the floor, or things are dirty. We want to avoid this whole idea of the man cave, because we want everybody to come in. And I know it's not just this idea of this man cave thing. It's everybody likes to come into a nice, clean place. We don't want it to be looks like somebody's garage. So keeping it nice and clean, it just makes it welcoming, and makes it and that really does send a message to your clients and customers about the fact of if you aren't keeping this clean, how are you taking care of the airplanes? Where if you come in and everything's well maintained and clean and it just looks nice. Even if it's not the newest facility, the fact that you show that effort there gives them the message that I'm going to show effort in my instruction, and I'm going to show effort in taking care of these airplanes too.
Yeah, and AeroVenture, like I said, their building certainly was not the newest. The airport had gone through a period of neglect, and they moved there in part because they wanted to be part of rebuilding it. But as part of that, they had to accept an older building that they had to really clean out of junk. But like I said, they made do kind of with what they had. Instead of having this brand new facility, they had just a kind of a blank concrete floor, but they painted a taxi line on the floors. It was kind of fun. And they put up a little Christmas tree, and they had a TV. And so, yeah, you can make do with all sorts of different facilities.
Absolutely. And again, it's just being creative and using what you have, and just putting the effort into it makes all the difference in the world. All right, so the next one is the community aspect one, and so really here these kind of go together in the sense of creating that welcoming and involved aviation community, making people feel welcome. We've kind of touched on that a bit already. Recognizing the milestones like solo, getting a certificate, maybe doing the first solo cross country, and then creating those connections to that larger community. And I know that, Ian, you've got examples too that you've already mentioned, or maybe even have more, on the ways that schools are able to do this to make people feel welcome.
Yeah, it's a huge point. I mean, not only being part of the community while you're in training and feeling like you're part of something in training, but knowing what to do with your certificate when you're done. I mean, we we focus so much on just that minimum 40 hours and getting people through the program that I think we often forget that the whole point here is to have them grow into competent and safe pilots beyond us. And so there are all kinds of different ways you can do this, from helping people through the airplane buying process to getting them, and we've seen all kinds of different things even through the poll, and because one of these has been a free response question, what do you do to introduce people to the community? And everything from introducing people at EAA chapter meetings, taking them to pancake breakfast. One school had this really creative thing where they had kind of a contest. You bought a T-shirt and you had to land at all these different airports, each of them having a restaurant, so that they had places to go when they were done with training and knew where to go. There's, in the case of San Carlos, you've got this built-in kind of social club. So there's flyouts. Paragon does flyouts. They've done in the Bahamas. AeroVenture obviously has a bunch of stuff built in. So all of the winning schools have some kind of really extensive built-in community, but all of them are a little different. So all kinds of different ways to make that happen.
I think the key there too is, again, is making it feel like the family, and you could do the barbecue like in the picture here too, or it's just anything to bring them together and make sure they feel welcome and to keep reaching out to them. And another thing too I remember hearing from, I know it was Paragon and I've heard it from other schools as well, is the idea if I haven't heard from somebody in a while, I mean, maybe they aren't in the schedule, like, hey, that person was fine, what happened to them? They've got the system of tracking, so they can go back and say, hey, you better call up, Joe, or you better call up Jill again, because we haven't heard from them in a while. And it's like, hey, let's get you back on the schedule. What's been going on? And they just check in with them, and a lot of times it's that little reach out there of saying, hey, we care about you, and we're wondering what happened to you. We want you to come on back out. And a lot of times that's all it takes to get somebody to come back and get flying again.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and the last one, there we go, for the tips for success, or the information sharing. And the big thing here is really just about transparency, to make sure you're not trying to, like you said before, in fact, I can remember calling the PIC back when I was doing my private, and I remember asking, it was a 141 school, like I said, and I was looking at the regs, and there was a cross-country thing, and I was like, I think I've got all this cross-country time, and they're telling me I need to do more, and it was this idea, they weren't clear about where I was going, and this is the 141 school that had the syllabus, but they didn't really explain that to me, and I was a teacher at the time, so I understood syllabus, and so the idea of being transparent and being honest about, this is where we're going, this is how much it's going to cost, or what the average is, and being honest about that whole process, rather than, sometimes, people will try to do the thing about, 40 hours is what you have to do to get it, but we know that most people don't finish in 40 hours unless they're really able to really concentrate a lot altogether, that's just not the norm.
Yeah, and this is so, I would say, unusual. And I think of like scuba diving. Like if you walked into a scuba diving shop and you said, well, how much does it take to learn to dive? And they said, well, $300, and at the end of it you spend $2,000, you'd feel ripped off. And it's not that you wouldn't necessarily spend the $2,000 up front, it's just that they told you $300 and you end up with $2,000. And so it's just about being transparent and doing it up front as much as you possibly can. So saying, okay, yeah, the minimum is 40, but really realistically expect to spend this. We'll help you throughout to lower costs by doing this. So it goes a huge way towards making people feel like they're getting value.
Exactly. I think that the key point you hit on there at the end too is the idea of value as well. Because like I said when we first started the webinar, is that idea of, if you say to somebody, oh, it's going to cost $8,000, $10,000, whatever, maybe like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But bring up the point too that bring up the point of value. Really share that part of it with them. Look what you get to do. Look at you get to go fly above the clouds when you do your instrument rating, or even if you're VFR, you get up high enough and go over a sort of a scattered layer or whatever, and you get to go and all those people down on the highway, they're driving to the beach and it's going to take them 3 hours to get there. You can get there in an hour or a half an hour. So share that all these incredible opportunities we get as pilots, and just the pure joy of just being able to fly the airplane by yourself. In fact, I know it took me, I don't know how many hours after my private even for it to sink in of, I can't believe they let me fly this thing by myself. So that idea of value and that idea of fulfilling those dreams and what you can accomplish, because it's huge. It's really amazing what we're allowed to do. All right, so to wrap this up, We're gonna talk about the secret, kind of the overall, sort of to cap it off, and then we're going to talk a little bit just about the poll that's coming up this year, and a little bit about what you can do to get people to participate in the poll. So let's first start with just sort of wrapping up the idea of what's the overall secret. And so I've got the main points that Ian and I pulled out here, this laser-like focus on customer service, hiring the right people, having that structured training and learning experience, fostering the community. We didn't talk about it as much, but obviously safety is huge because you want people to feel safe and you want to be safe. And then the emphasis on the value and the quality that you're providing, because, you know, it's that idea. People know you get what you pay for. And if you want to go to the place that's going to be the absolute totally cheapest place possible, that you're going to figure out that you're kind of getting what you're paid for. You're maybe not going to have the best instructor. So it's okay maybe to pay a little bit more if I'm going to get quality. And in fact, that's why you have some of the really experienced CFIs that are out there that, you know, are charging $100 an hour. It's like, how can they do that? But it's because people know this person's really experienced, and I'm not saying for you to charge $100 an hour, but the idea that people are willing to pay for quality. They know that if I'm going to go with this person, I know I'm getting something special. And so if you can show them that for what we're providing, what we're going to have for you here, we're going to really give you some great quality and value. All right. So let's talk about the poll now. We've talked about some of the things that we've seen, and I really do hope you guys, you know, feel free to contact us too if you want to go into more depth. But these are the things that we see from the schools that have done well over the past several years. And so, you know what the biggest thing though is? If you guys want to be in on this too, if you want to be able to do well in the poll, you got to play to win. You got to participate in the poll. And how do you do that? You got to get your customers to do it. The poll this year will be open from May 23rd until August 22nd. So you got 3 months there during the summer where you can have your clients and customers and students to go on here. And, you know, one of the things, too, I want to say is don't be afraid to promote. Don't be humble. You know, to go out there and tell them, like, hey, we really want you to participate in this because think about it. Just be, you know, you could say, look what we're going to get out of this. It's like our school can get recognized, but more importantly, you're going to get feedback from your customers, the real deal of what's going on, which can really drive you to continue to improve, to continue to become the best. So don't be afraid to promote about it. Don't be humble. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I want to do this. And the other thing there, too, is that I have your CFIs encourage the client participation. Telling them once isn't enough. So it's not the idea of like, oh, yeah, by the way, have you heard about AOPA's flight training poll? Yeah, it'd be really cool if you did that. Man, we're going to have posters downloadable when it opens up. We made them last year. So there's a poster you can download and print out and put that up. You can tell them, you know, put it on your receipt. Hey, did you vote in the poll? Here's the link to go to. Maybe put it on your website. Please go and vote on AOPA's flight training poll for us. Just really, I don't want to say like be pushy about it, but really make sure like you can help us out. And we really want you to let us know how we're doing. So please participate in the poll. And so that's that verbal encouragement, the promotions. We're even toying around with an idea of like an I voted sticker. So we want to help you out, but it's also up to you to go out and really get people fired up about this and what they can do and to get them to do it for you. And in fact, as a little preview for you as well, the minimum to be eligible this year will be 5 respondents. 5 respondents is our thing right now. And so obviously the more you get, the more feedback you get. So just make it your target. We want to get at least 10 of our clients to do this in the poll for us. And don't be afraid to even give them an incentive. Say, hey, if you go and fill out the poll for us and you can show us that you did that, print out the end screen or something that says thank you for doing the poll, bring that to me and maybe we'll give you, a little extra, like a half an hour of ground time free, or we'll let you go on the sim or something like that. So don't be afraid to do that. Go out and promote it. Let people know that you want them to do it and show them that you value their input. And don't be afraid to get the media working for you too. So utilize both your internal media in your school, like the newsletter, emails, but also external media like the newspapers, the local news and everything. Tell them or pitch the stories to them about how your customers are doing, the things that they're accomplishing. So like I guess my big point is get out there and get fired up about this and really encourage your clients and customers to participate because it's, we'll get these report cards out to you guys too. It's going to help you out as well, and plus get you maybe some recognition, which is really cool and hopefully well-deserved. And just to wrap things up, we've got, this is AOPA's Flight Training Initiative. So there's the address for the poll. It's aopa.org, ftpoll/ftpoll. That's the short address for it. And once we open it up on May 23rd, there'll be a link. They can click on it. They can go in there and fill it out. I already gave you the preview. It's about 29 questions for schools. It's about 26 questions for CFIs. So there's a little bit of a time commitment here, but if they kind of know ahead of time, what the commitment is, and they can sit down and do that. And pretty much all the questions are, they give a statement, and it's basically I either disagree or agree in a range, and it's pretty straightforward. In fact, we're even organizing it so it kind of goes through the flow of what you would do with flight training. If you guys haven't heard, a quick plug for Rusty Pilots, because I've got my team here too. We've got Megan McCutcheon's here with me. We both run Rusty Pilots program. So if you guys are looking for ways to get pilots into your school, please do check out rustypilots.org, and we will do the promotion for you. We'll send out a free email for you for all the pilots that are lapsed in your area. So please check that out if you haven't done it. It's a great way to get people in. And then we got Flight School Business News. If you don't subscribe to that, check that out as well. We send out a monthly newsletter that focuses on things for flight schools that are written on the marketing and the business side of things, to just give you some insight on what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, so Chris, I want to actually say about Rusty Pilots, I mean, don't be, I don't want you to be shy about promoting it, because if you haven't heard about the program, it is really phenomenal. It's, at its core, really all it is a seminar, but it's turned out to be so much more than that. It's a way to satisfy the ground requirement to get people back for their flight review, and so we're finding that, and you probably have the exact number, but you would think that the whole idea is to get lapsed pilots who maybe haven't flown in like 6 months, a year, or something like that, but we're talking people who have been on the aviation for something like 7 years on average.
Right.
So this is a huge way to get renters and people back into your local aviation community, and a way for you to do it so that they come to you for future business and partnering with us. So it's been successful, and I think it's a really, really cool program.
And I could add on to that too, the idea that when most of our schools do this, the average is right around 30 people that will come to these presentations, and we give you the PowerPoint. In fact, we are just about to introduce a brand new version of it. It's a scenario-based version of Rusty Pilots. I'm going to be beta testing it down at Sun and Fun. So if you want to stop by and check out what it's about, we've got some really cool handbook that goes with it. So it's going to be really a lot of fun, and it won't be too much longer until we get that out, so that everybody that does Rusty Pilots will be able to use the new version of it. And like I said, you'll get typically on average 30 people on average. We've had as many as, 60, 70? What's probably the biggest one we've had that was for Rusty Pilots? What was the biggest one we had for a non-AOPA Rusty Pilots? Like 100? Yeah, 100 people came to one. And so it's a really great way to get local pilots in your community to come on out. And it really is, again, it's just that idea of people haven't given up on flying. They just aren't able to do it right now. So I want to go ahead and see if we've got some questions from some of the folks that asked during the presentation. And let's see, it looks like I've got one here that says, is it okay to offer incentives or prizes for people that are participating in the poll? And I kind of answered this one already. What are your thoughts on that, Ian? Do you think it's okay to offer incentives for people to participate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I know people are a little reluctant to do it sometimes because they think it's somehow cheating or something. But the whole idea is that the student goes home and does this on their own time. They can say whatever they want, and we encourage them to say whatever they want. Really, all you're asking them is for their feedback and for a few minutes of their time. So, absolutely. I think we know of one school has done it. They offered sim time. I mean, if you want to offer T-shirts or sim time or ground time or whatever, I think it's a great way to get people involved, and it works.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Ian. And we got another question here. Do you have to be a 141 school to participate, or can you be a 61 school? Absolutely. You can be a Part 61 school, Part 141 school. As long as you're a school and you're providing flight training, we welcome you. Please do participate. So, yeah, absolutely. Do not have to be a 141 school. Yeah, please make sure you jump in if you've got flight instruction going on. If you're a flight instructor and you're providing instruction, like last year we had Todd Shellnut, who's a DPE down in Atlanta, Georgia, the Atlanta, Georgia area. He won our best CFI, and so he encouraged his students to participate as well. So, yeah, absolutely. Please do get in on that.
Another question, are there any best practices on how to use social media to promote flight training?
That's a great question. Social media, how are the best practices on using social media for promoting this? Well, obviously, if you've got a Facebook page, that's a great way to get it out there and kind of like keep promoting it and letting people know that it's out there. That would be the biggest thing that I would do. And in fact, I'll tell you what, that's one. Ian, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I do have one follow-up thought.
Yeah, well, we talked about recognition a little bit, and there's no better way, I think, social media to do recognition. I mean, every time, just make it a practice. Every time somebody solos, they get to pass a check ride, maybe even intro flights, depending on how busy you are. Who knows? Maybe they go through the solo cross-country phase, a picture of them smiling in front of the airplane, because obviously that shows to your current customers that people are successful, they're having fun, but it shows the way social media works obviously is the people who you're recognizing, then it goes out to their networks, and so your school gets that much more recognition through their personal networks. So I think recognition is the best way to do it. Obviously, you can put new airplanes online, seminars, all that kind of stuff, but really it's about people. And the most effective way to be seen on social media is multimedia. So whether you're posting videos, photos, whatever, make sure you include that stuff.
Okay, yeah, exactly. And in fact, I know I saw a school that was doing exactly that. They would post people doing their intro flights and then doing the solo flights and that sort of stuff. And that's a great way to do it, to really get it out there and showing like, hey, this is possible. Like, hey, I know that guy and he did that. Man, I can do that too. And in fact, I also want to invite you too to contact us. I think I've got my email here in the end. My email, and maybe I don't. It's chris.moser, M-O-S-E-R, at AOPA.org. Or you can just give a call at the 800 number and they'll get you up here to me. But we've got our director of media, and he's got all kinds of crazy ideas, really great stuff on how to do that. So I will go and pick his brain for you and share that stuff, because that really is a good question to even add more on to how to use social media. We've got a question up here. It says, the FAA has promised that there'll be, it's about the new April 1st deal that's coming up where the student pilot certificate won't be issued by the AME anymore. It's going to be issued through IACRA. And so it says, how do flight schools cope with this fact that there may be a 3-week delay for getting that hard copy certificate? I'd say the biggest thing is that when people come in, you got to figure, it depends on the kind of school you are. I know it's a kind of a challenge for maybe some of the schools that are doing this sort of super compressed, getting the student pilot, like they're going to solo people in a week, and then you kind of do a little planning ahead. But I'd say for most schools, I would just make sure that as soon as they come in and they've taken their intro flight and they're fired up about it, go ahead and have them apply for the student pilot certificate right away, so that way, when that 3 weeks does come, if they've been training regularly and they're ready to solo, you're ready to go with that. So just kind of be honest with them, saying that here's the process, and because of this, we're going to go ahead and jump on it right now, and just explain to them what it's for, and maybe help them through the process with going through ACRA so it's not so intimidating. And even in some cases, you can say, hey, if you want to keep it's the ID thing you have to have. If you want to give us that, give us a copy of that as well, so we can keep it on file for you, so that when it comes time for your check ride and everything, you won't lose that or won't misplace it. So yeah, just work with your clients that come in and just let them know and get started on it right away. I got one more question here. It's when can I get my results? When can I find out how I did on the poll? And so I said before that the flight training poll is open until August 22nd. Of course, it's a huge team we have here at AOPA. There's me and Megan that run this thing, and so we get some help from some folks around the building. So just so you know, it's going to take us about a month. And we actually are working on the process. We have our resident statistician. We've got a couple actually now helping us out that'll crunch the numbers. Then we've got to go through the process of picking the best and doing the blind panel and all that stuff. So typically by the end of October, beginning of November, we should be ready to be able to tell you. And of course, we're going to try to shoot for it earlier than that. But that gives us about the month of September to work through all of it and then kind of get everything ready for the press releases and all the stuff during October. So that's kind of when you can expect it. So just when the poll ends, please don't, just understand that we can't tell you right away because we need to crunch the numbers, and there's a little bit of a process there. Because last year we had 7,000 entries, and so there's a lot of data that has to be kind of sorted through and figuring all that out. And so we learned a lot last year, and we're going to try to improve that process this year and make it even more streamlined. All right, so what I want to do here is I just want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. I want to thank Ian. Thanks so much for joining me and being my co-host tonight and offering all the insights you have from doing the Flight Training Poll, or the Flight Training Excellence Awards. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Happy to do it, and happy to be a part of it, and excited to see what we learned this year. Cool. And then I also wanted to recognize both Les Smith, who's our Senior Director of Pilot Community Development, who's here with us behind the scenes running the show, and Megan McCutcheon, who's actually sort of the driving force behind Rusty Pilots. If you've done a Rusty Pilots, you have I'm sure corresponded or maybe spoken with Megan on the phone. So I want to thank both of them for being here with me tonight to help me run this. And I want to thank all of you for joining me. And please, if you do have any questions, don't be afraid to give us a call or also contact us by email. My email address again is Chris, C-H-R-I-S, .M-O-S-E-R, Chris Moser at AOPA.org. And thanks again for joining us, and I hope you guys have a good night.